My daughter took my social security check and took off for the beach, leaving me with no food. She came back, sun-kissed and happy, thinking I'd be begging for help. But when she opened screamed in horror at what she saw inside. Greetings, dear listeners. Before I begin my story, a story of betrayal and how I one day chose myself, I ask you to support this channel. Please subscribe and hit the like button. It helps stories like this be heard. And write in the comments what city or country you are listening from. It always warms my spirit to see how many of us there are. And now enjoy the story. The front door had slammed shut 3 hours ago, but the heavy sugary scent of Quintessa's perfume still hung in the hallway. That fragrance always seemed too intrusive to me, too loud for our old brownstone with its high ceilings where the air was used to smelling like the dust of ages and dried lavender. Stood in the middle of the kitchen, staring at the closed door of the pantry. The silence in the house was absolute ringing. I used to love this silence. It meant peace after a long day. At the sewing machine when my eyes were tired from tiny stitches and my back ached from the endless stooping. But today the silence felt predatory. It was waiting. My stomach twisted into a tight knot. It's shameful to admit, but I was hungry. Just ordinary human hunger, the kind that gets persistent by evening. I walked over to the cabinet. The hinges creaked as if complaining about the disturbance. The shelves were impeccably clean and terrifyingly empty. Quintessa had packed in a rush. She had darted around the apartment like a bright tropical bird trapped in a cage, tossing bikinis, light sundresses, and tanning lotions into her suitcase. I remembered how she stopped in the doorway, already wearing her shoes, and held out her hand. Mama, give me your card just in case. What if the ATM down there doesn't work or something? But Quintessa, I tried to object, feeling a chill run down my spine. That's my whole social security check. What am I supposed to live on for 2 weeks? Oh, don't start. She rolled her eyes, snatching the plastic card from my fingers. You've got a full jar of grits. Boil them up, add a little butter, and it's beautiful. It'll be good for you to detox. Doctors advise a diet for everyone at your age. Don't invent problems where there aren't any. I deserve this vacation. And she left. She flew off to Miami, to the sun, to cocktails with little umbrellas, taking my money, my peace of mind, and as it turned out, my food with her. Grits. Right, she mentioned grits. I reached for the top shelf where the old glass jar stood, labeled grits, in my own handwriting some 20 years ago. The jar felt suspiciously light. I took off the lid and looked inside. At the bottom, amid some grayish dust, lay a few lonely grains. There wasn't enough to feed a sparrow, let alone a grown woman. She had lied. Or maybe she just didn't care. She hadn't even bothered to check if there was food before condemning me to this starvation diet. She just threw words out to silence my anxiety and forgot about me the second she called her Uber. My chest went cold. It wasn't the kind of cold you get from a draft. It was ice that starts growing from the inside when you realize that the person you carried, nursed, and raised isn't just selfish. They are cruel. I closed the jar and put it back. The sound of glass against wood rang out. Like a gunshot. I had to do something. Maybe some loose change. Quintessa often scattered coins, shaking them out of her jeans pockets. I headed to her room. Chaos reigned here. Clothes were strewn on chairs. Open tubes of lipstick on the vanity. Crumpled receipts on the floor. I started methodically searching the surfaces under a stack of glossy magazines. Nothing. In the jewelry dish, empty. My gaze fell on a crumpled piece of paper carelessly thrown at the trash bin, but missing the mark. I bent down and picked it up. It was a print out of the hotel reservation and flight itinerary. I smoothed the sheet out on the tabletop. The letters danced before my eyes, but I saw the total figure. Immediately. It was bold, black, and merciless. The amount my daughter had spent on 2 weeks of beach relaxation was exactly equal to 3 months of my benefits. 3. I stood in the semi-darkness of her room, and it felt like the walls were closing in. For years I had darned my old stockings. I had turned coats inside out to remake them. Coats I'd been wearing since before the turn of the century. I denied myself an extra peach to buy her the best shoes for school, then for college, then just because, Mama, this is what's in style. Now, I walked out of her room, pulling the door firmly shut behind me as if cutting myself off from that smell of carelessness and betrayal. The living room met me with silent grandeur. Walked in. Here, in the light of the street lamps filtering through the heavy velvet curtains, stood them my treasures, my jailers, the antique oak buffet, carved and heavy as a tombstone. Inside, behind the glass, the crystal and fine Haveland Limoges porcelain gleamed dully, a service for 12 which we had eaten from maybe twice in our lives. This is for a Quintessa's wedding, I used to tell myself. The wedding never happened, but the china waited. On the dresser stood a silver tea service that had come down to me from my grandmother. Next to it, jewelry box with pieces I never wore because where would an old woman like me go in this? Let it stay for the grandchildren. In the hall closet hung fur coats, smelling of mothballs, which Quintessa contemptuously called dust collectors, but which were worth a fortune. I looked around my living room. This wasn't a home. It was a museum. The Quintessa Johnson Museum. And I wasn't the mistress of the house. I was the unpaid curator. A curator who shuffles around in worn-out slippers, wipes dust off the exhibits, and starves to death so that one day a visitor can come and take everything without even saying thank you. My stomach growled treacherously again. But now something else was mixed with the sound. Anger? No, anger is a hot feeling. This was clarity. Icy, crystal clear clarity. I walked over to the coffee table where a stack of old newspapers lay. Quintessa always scolded me for not throwing them out. Junk trash, she would snort. But I knew that in the classified section there was something I needed. I had seen the ad a week ago, circled it in pencil just because out of habit, never admitting the thought that I might need it. I sorted through the papers. There it was. The City Chronicle. The page with private ads. The red pencil circle was barely visible in the dim light, but I knew what it said. Mr. Allister. Sterling, I buy antiques, porcelain, silver, rarities, honest appraisal. House calls. I looked at the telephone. Old rotary reliable grits, you say? Whispered into the void. I picked up the receiver. The dial tone was long and steady. I started turning the dial, entering the number, digit after digit. Every turn of the dial took effort as if I were cracking a safe where my own life had been locked away. It started ringing. 1 2 3. Hello, a male voice answered slightly, raspy but polite. Listening. I took a deep breath of air that smelled like the dust of my museum. Good evening. My voice sounded unexpectedly firm, even to myself. I didn't care because my children were okay. Because Tanisha and Malik had food on the table. Because they could go to school. Because they had clean clothes. Because they had shoes. Because they had a mother who would give her life for them. And I was ready to give it. Tanisha was the oldest, always more serious, more responsible. She helped me with Malik, looked after him when I had to work late, prepared dinner for him, and helped him with his homework. Was an adult child in a child's body, and I felt guilty about that, for robbing her of her childhood, for forcing her to grow up so fast. Malik was different, cheerful, a dreamer, always inventing things. He drew on any paper he could find. He told me that when he grew up, he was going to be an artist, that he was going to be famous, that he was going to buy me a big house, and that I would never have to work again. And I believed him because mothers always believe their children. The years passed. They grew up. The house felt smaller and smaller. Tanisha started complaining. She said her friends had better things, better houses, better clothes, better lives. She looked at me with that silent reproach that hurt more than any word. As if it were my fault we were poor. As if I wasn't doing everything possible. Malik changed too. He stopped drawing. He stopped dreaming. He He started hanging out with other boys. He came home late and wouldn't tell me where he had been. When I asked, he answered in monosyllables. He became distant, cold, like a stranger living in my house. But I kept working, kept sacrificing myself, because that's what mothers do. Because I thought that someday they would understand that. Someday they would be grateful, that someday they would tell me, "Thank you, Mama, for everything you did for us." When Tanisha turned 18, she got a job at a downtown store. She started earning her own money. I thought she would help me. I thought that now that she was working, I could rest a little. But no. Tanisha saved every cent. She bought new clothes, new shoes, makeup, perfumes. She went out with her friends. And when I asked her to contribute something to the house, she looked at me like I was asking for her kidney. Malik barely finished school. He didn't want to go to college. He said college wasn't for him. That he was going to get a job, that he was going to make money, and that he didn't need more education. I didn't insist. I was tired of fighting. I was tired of everything. He got a job at a mechanic shop. He earned little, but it was something. I thought he would stay with me, that he would help me with expenses, but after 6 months he told me he was moving out. He had found an apartment with some friends. He needed his space. He was a man now, and he couldn't stay living with me forever. I remained silent. I didn't say anything. I just helped him pack his things. I gave him money for the first month's rent, money I didn't have money. I took from my meager savings, and I watched him leave without looking back. Tanisha left 2 years later. She met a man, fell in love, and got married. She didn't invite me to the wedding. Well, she did invite me, but it was one of those obligatory invitations you make, because you have to. I went to the wedding. I sat in a corner. No one talked to me. No one introduced me. No one made me feel important. I was just the mother of the bride, an afterthought, an obligation. Tanisha's marriage lasted 3 years. Then she divorced, came back to my house crying, telling me the man had cheated on her, that he had treated her badly, that she needed a place to stay. I took her in. Of course I took her in. She was my daughter. But she didn't thank me. She stayed for 6 months, recovered, met another man, and left again without saying goodbye. Malik never married. Had girlfriends, many girlfriends, all fleeting, all the same. He introduced them to me when he needed to impress them. Look, this is my mama. Bless her heart, she lives alone, always so sacrificial. And they looked at me with pity, with that pity that makes you feel small, invisible. Special occasions, and walked out of the house. My legs carried me on their own, but not to the usual discount supermarket with yellow price tags and wilted cabbage. I was walking downtown to the Epicurean Market. I hadn't been there in 15 years. The prices there bit so hard it was scary to even look at the windows. But today I wasn't planning to look. The heavy doors swung open before me, and I was washed over by the smell of fresh baking, coffee, and expensive spices. Walked past the shelves like a queen returning from exile. I didn't look at potatoes. I didn't look for discounts on pasta. I went to the deli counter. Weigh me out half a pound of prosciutto di Parma, please, I told the clerk. And some of that Virginia ham. Then came the cheese section. I took a wedge of aged Parmesan and a soft brie with truffles. I grabbed a jar of almond stuffed olives. I bought a fresh baguette, still warm, crusty, and then I saw them. Peaches, huge, velvety, filled with sunshine, lying on a woven tray. Out of season, of course. Imported. They cost as much as an airplane wing. Too, said the most beautiful ones. And finally the seafood section. Cold. Smoked salmon, thin slices, translucent in the light, the color of sunset. Walked out of the market with 2 paper bags. They weren't heavy, but they held more life than all my stocks of grits. Over the last 10 years. At home, I didn't eat in the kitchen on the oil tablecloth. I went into the living room. I took a snow-white tablecloth with handmade lace out of the sideboard. Quintessa forbade me to use it. Yule. That I couldn't help them this time. Tanisha got up from the armchair and exhaled in frustration. Unbelievable. Mama. Right now, when we really need you, you can't help us. Malik also stood up. Well, then we'll have to figure it out some other way. Thanks anyway. His thank you sounded empty, fake like everything that came out of his mouth lately. They left without saying goodbye, without asking how I was, without noticing that I had been crying all afternoon, without seeing the table I had set for them, without caring that it was Mother's Day and they had left me alone. They left and closed the door, and I stayed there again in that empty living room, in that empty house, in that empty life. I stayed awake all night. I couldn't sleep. My mind wouldn't stop going over everything. The years, the sacrifices, the times I had gone without eating so they could eat. The times I had worked sick to pay for their school. The times I had given them even what I didn't have. And they didn't even remember. They weren't even grateful. To them, I was just an ATM, a place to come when they needed something, a resource, not a person, not their mother, just a source of money that should always be available. The next day, I got up early. I hadn't slept, but I got up anyway. I made myself a cup of coffee, sat in the kitchen, and made a decision. I was going to investigate. Long receipt from the gourmet. Slightly lighter, outlining a rectangle. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the market. I carefully smoothed it out and placed it right in the center of that light rectangle in place of the family. Silver. On the receipt, amidst the list of delicacies, the word total was printed in large letters. I smiled at my reflection in the glass of the sideboard. Dinner, I whispered. It was just dinner. The week flew by like one long sunny day. I woke up not to an alarm clock to run to the cheap store for discounts, but when the sun touched my pillow. Had croissants with butter for breakfast, not empty oatmeal. And so, as I sat in the armchair with a glass of rich red wine, a Cabernet from 2015, advised by the sommelier at the wine boutique, the phone rang. The ring was harsh, demanding. I knew who it was. Without even picking up. Only Quintessa knew how to call, as if the telephone should apologize for not ringing sooner. Hello. I brought the receiver to my ear, not setting down my glass. Mama. My daughter's voice burst into my silence. In the background, the ocean roared, seagulls screamed, and some rhythmic music played. How are you doing there? Still alive? There was so much feigned concern in her voice, mixed with blatant superiority, that the wine seemed sour for a moment. Alive? Quintessa, quite I was thinking, she spoke loudly, shouting over the surf. You're probably bored there alone and hungry. You boil that grits but add more water. It's more filling that way. Old Grandma's recipe, remember? I took a sip of wine. The velvety taste returned, washing away the bitterness of her words. I'm managing, I answered calmly. Don't worry. Oh, come on. Don't put on a brave face, she chuckled. I know you've got nothing to eat there, but it's okay. Hold on for another week. By the way, I saw a fridge magnet for you shaped like a dolphin. If of course you don't run up the electric bill while I'm gone, because I know you'll forget to turn off the light in the bathroom and I'll have to pay for it later. She spoke to me like an unreasonable child, like a burden that needed to be controlled even from 1,000 miles away. Before, I would have started making excuses. I would have said, no, baby. I'm saving. I don't even turn on the TV. But now I just smiled at my reflection in the dark window. I'm finding resources Quintessa didn't even suspect existed, I uttered, looking at the wine bottle on the table. So don't worry about the lights. Resources. She laughed again. And there was so much smugness in that laugh. What are you talking about? Found some change in the sofa or went to Miss Theodosia for salt? Look, don't embarrass me in front of the neighbors. Don't go around with your hand out. All right, I got to go. We have a pool party. Don't get bored there with your porridge. Click. She hung up, confident in her complete, undivided power over me. In her picture of the world, I was sitting right now in a dark kitchen, choking on plain porridge, counting the days until her return so I could gratefully accept a magnet and a new portion of reproaches. She thought she had broken me, that the hunger training was successful. I finished the wine, feeling the warmth spread through my body. Pool party, I repeated, placing the empty glass on the table. Well, I have my own plans too. I picked up the notebook lying next to the phone. On the open page, a time was already written down. Tomorrow, 11 o'clock sharp. Alistair S. had planned to sell the wardrobe. That huge oak closet in the hallway that took up half the passage and always snagged my sleeves with its carved corners. It was antique, expensive, but I hated it. It was a dark spot that absorbed light. But after the conversation with Quintessa, I changed my mind. The wardrobe, that's too much hassle. Movers, noise, dust. I wanted something elegant, something that would hit her just as painfully as her words about watering down the grits. I got up and went to the dresser in the bedroom. There, in the top drawer, lay another jewelry box, smaller. I opened it. On a velvet cushion lay a brooch, an antique gold piece in the shape of a twig with leaves studded with small diamonds and a large dark ruby in the center. This ruby burned like a drop of thick blood. Quintessa adored this brooch. She never asked for permission, just took it when she went on a date or an office party. "Mama, it's vintage. It's all the rage right now," she would say, pinning the brooch to the lapel of her blazer. She considered this thing hers, just like the apartment, just like me. I took the brooch in my hands. The stone was cold, but quickly warmed up in my palm. I remembered how Quintessa once lost the clasp from it, and didn't even apologize. "Well, fix it. You're a seamstress," she tossed out then. And I fixed it. Tomorrow Mr. Sterling would come to appraise the wardrobe, but he wouldn't leave with it. In the morning, the antique dealer was precise as always. "Good morning, Mrs. Ulley," smiled, tipping his hat. Ready to part with the giant in the hallway? I shook my head, inviting him in. "I changed my mind about the wardrobe, Alistair. Changed my mind for now. Too much fuss. But I have something else, something more personal." I held out the brooch to him. Mr. Sterling's eyes lit up with professional excitement. He carefully took the piece, held it up to the light, and put on his inevitable loupe. "Oh," he exhaled. "Late 19th century St. Petersburg work, perhaps?" "No, likely new. Orleans Creole craftsmanship. The ruby is natural, unheated, very deep color. And old mine-cut diamonds. This is a piece with character." "How much?" I asked. He named a price. It was twice as high as for the spoons. It was money one could live on comfortably for 6 months, or treat oneself to 2 weeks of paradise. "It's yours," I said. Not bargaining this time. The price was fair, and my desire to get rid of this thing was burning. When Alistair counted out the bills, I looked at the brooch one last time. It lay on the table, sparkling in a sunbeam. Beautiful, predatory, alien. "You know," Alistair said, putting the brooch into a special pouch, "this item surely has a history." "It does." I nodded, taking the money. "But the history has ended. Now it's just stone and metal." He left, and I was alone again. I looked at the spot in the jewelry box where the ruby used to lie. Emptiness. But this emptiness wasn't frightening. It promised new possibilities. I picked up the phone and dialed the number of a food delivery service from that very restaurant I always walked past, lowering my eyes so as not to see the prices on the menu displayed on the street. "Good afternoon," I said. "I want to place an order." "Yes, delivery." "Write this down. Crab and avocado salad v. medallions with mushroom sauce." And I thought for a second, remembering Quintessa's words about water in the grits, and a bottle of champagne, the coldest you have. I hung up and felt a spring uncoil inside me. Quintessa would be back in a week. She would look for her favorite vintage brooch to show off her tan and new jewelry to her girlfriends. Let her look. Meanwhile, I would drink to her health and to the fact that I really did find resources. Not in the sofa, but in the self-respect I had finally bought back. The champagne sparkled in the glass, lifting tiny bubbles from the bottom, but the festive mood evaporated suddenly. As soon as I opened the bottom drawer of the secretary desk, I was looking for the certificate for a painting, a landscape with a river by an unknown artist from the late 19th century that hung in the living room. Alistair hinted that with papers, the price would be higher. The drawer was stuffed with old receipts, warranty cards for appliances broken long ago, and other paper junk that Quintessa had dumped here for years. I started sorting through the papers, irritably setting aside instructions for an iron and a hairdryer. And then my fingers hit a thick plastic folder, shoved deep under a stack of old Essence magazines. The folder wasn't mine. I never bought such bright red screaming colors. I pulled it out into the light. Inside lay several sheets stapled together. On top was a glossy brochure. Cheap paper, bad printing, blurry photos of smiling old people playing checkers. Restful Meadows State Facility for Veterans and Seniors. The name seemed familiar. I had heard about it somewhere. Miss Theodosia, the neighbor, told terrible things, said it smelled of bleach and boiled cabbage, that the staff was rude, and the old folks lay for days staring at the ceiling because no one cared about them. It was a state institution, the most budget-friendly one with a bad reputation, a place where they send you to wait for the end, to be forgotten. My hands started to shake. I set aside the brochure and picked up the next document. It was a draft, a general power of attorney. In the header, my details. In the agent field, Quintessa Johnson. And below in fine print, a list of powers. Right to manage all property, sell real estate, represent interests in medical institutions. A date was penciled in the margins. Next month, immediately after her return, the world tilted. I grabbed the edge of the table so I wouldn't fall. The air in the room suddenly became thick and viscous. This wasn't just selfishness. This was a plan. A cold, calculated plan. She wasn't just waiting for me to die to get the inheritance. She was tired of waiting. She decided to check me in. Check me into Restful Meadows like an old item to the scrapyard to free up the apartment, sell the antiques, and live easy on my money while I rotted in a government ward. She smiled at me, took my card, went to the sea at my expense, knowing that in a month she would kick me out of my own home. Tears didn't flow. Instead, a wave of such fury rose inside me that I thought I would scream, but I stayed silent. The fury forged itself into action. If before I sold things just to eat and pamper myself a little, now, this was war. I threw the folder back into the drawer, but didn't close it, let it lie there as a reminder. I grabbed the phone. The ringing seemed infinitely long. Mr. Sterling. My voice rang like a taut string. It's Ully. Have you gone far? I'm still in the neighborhood, Ully, he responded with surprise. Did something happen? Did you find something else interesting? I found a reason. I cut him off. Come back and bring a truck. We're clearing everything out. Everything? Disbelief sounded in his voice. Mrs. Ully, are you sure? That is a serious decision. Absolutely. I'm selling the painting, the clock, the rug, and that service in the buffet. Everything that has value. Come asked me if I was sure about what I wanted to do. I told him yes, surer than ever. We started the process. Avery drafted a new will, one where I decided who inherited what. He prepared documents to change the beneficiaries of my bank account. He prepared everything so that when I died, my children would not automatically receive anything, or they would receive the minimum, whatever I decided to give them. But we also talked about something else. We talked about what to do while I was alive. Avery suggested I open a new account, an account my children didn't know about, where I could keep my money, where they couldn't ask me because they wouldn't know it existed. I did exactly that. I opened an account at a different bank. I transferred most of my pension to that new account. I left only the minimum in the old account, just enough to make it seem like I barely had enough to live on, which was true. But now I had a little saved, a little that was only mine, a little that no one was going to take from me. I also started selling things. Old things I had in the house. Furniture I no longer used, clothes that no longer fit me, books, dishes, things I had accumulated over 50 years of life. I sold them online with the help of Ellie, who understood those things better than I did. It wasn't much money, 50 here, 100 there, but it added up. I Saved every cent in my new account, my secret account, my escape fund because that was what I was planning. An escape, a way out, a way to disappear from this life that was slowly killing me. Every day that passed, I was sure I didn't want to continue like this anymore. I didn't want to be the mother who begged for crumbs of affection. I didn't want to be the old woman who funds them. I looked up bus tickets. I looked up distant destinations, places where no one knew me, where I could start over, where Vivian Sterling could be someone different, someone free. I found a coastal town about 600 miles from here, a small, quiet place with cheap houses, with a view of the sea with that ocean I always wanted to see. The ticket cost $70 one way. I saved that information. I hadn't bought it yet, but I knew I would soon. In the meantime, I kept pretending. I kept being the same Vivian. As always when Tanisha or Malik called, which was rare. Very rare. 2 weeks passed without hearing from them. Not a call, not a text, nothing. As if I didn't exist, as if I had died and no one had noticed. But I was fine. For the first time in a long time, I was fine being alone because I knew that loneliness was temporary, because I knew I was doing something, that I was taking control, that I was building something new. Ellie came to visit me often. We drank coffee. We talked. She told me about her grandchildren, about her life. I told her about my plans. She supported me. She told me I was doing the right thing, that I deserved to be happy, that I deserved to live for myself. One day, she said something that stuck with me. Vivian, you gave 50 years of your life for them. Now it's time for you to give yourself at least 10 years for you before it's too late. And she was right. I was 70 years old. If I was lucky, I had 10 or 15 more years left. And I wanted to live them. Truly live them. Not just exist. Waiting for my children to remember that I had a name. I signed the new papers with Avery, the new will, the bank documents, everything legal, everything in order. He gave me copies. He explained that now everything was protected, that I had done the right thing. He shook my refrigerator. It was Alibaba's cave, only edible. I paid, gave a generous tip, and closed the door behind them. I walked to the fridge, grabbed the handle, opened it. The light of the bulb reflected in the gold foil of the champagne and the glossy sides of the caviar jars. The cold air smelled not of soup and medicine, but of wealth. I stood and looked at this abundance. This was my answer, my shield, my sword. Quintessa wanted to send me to the scrap heap to get an inheritance. Well, the inheritance is now here in this fridge, chilled and ready for consumption, but not by her. I closed the door. The click of the latch sounded like a verdict. The wait wasn't long. 2 weeks of silence ended exactly at noon when a key scratched in the lock. I was sitting in the kitchen with my back to the hallway, drinking tea or coffee. Notea. Real. Darjeeling, tart and fragrant. The cup in my hands was thin, almost transparent. I didn't flinch. I waited. The door swung open with a crash, hitting the wall. The noise of the street. The smell of airplane fuel and hot asphalt burst into the apartment. Mama, I'm home. Quintessa's voice boomed like a victor's fanfare. I hope you've humbled yourself enough to apologize for your behavior before I left. I'm tired from the trip and don't want to listen to your whining. The sound of heavy suitcase wheels dragging across the parquet floor followed. She entered, expecting the usual semi-darkness, the smell of medicine, and my hunched figure rushing to meet her with slippers in hand. She expected to see her victim, broken, hungry and guilty. But instead she was met by a smell, not of mustastiness, but of fresh lees, a huge bouquet of which stood in a vase on the floor, and the subtle trail of my new perfume, sandalwood and jasmine. Quintessa froze on the threshold. I heard her sniffing the air, trying to understand what was happening. What is that smell? She asked suspiciously. Did you spill air freshener or something? She took a step forward and suddenly stopped. The sound of her heels was too echoing. Wait. A note of confusion slipped into her voice. Why is it so spacious in here? She looked around. Her gaze slid over the floor where the heavy Persian rug, which always collected dust, was no longer. She looked at the corner where grandfather's floor clock used to stand. Its ticking, driving her crazy in childhood. Now it was empty there. Just a clean light wall. "Mama," she called. Out quieter now, but immediately shook her head, driving away the strange feeling of wrongness. "Okay, we'll figure out later where you shoved everything again. I'm hungry as a wolf. They fed us some garbage on the plane." She dropped her purse right on the floor and marched decisively toward the kitchen. I didn't even turn around. I just took another sip of tea and placed the cup on the saucer. Clink. The sound was quiet, but distinct. Quintessa walked into the kitchen. She was tanned to redness. Her nose was peeling. She was wearing a bright sundress with a floral print that looked alien in this strict, clean kitchen. "So what do we have?" she asked aggressively, not really greeting me. "I bet you didn't cook anything except your porridge. I could eat a sandwich right now even with butter, if yours hasn't gone rancid." She walked past me like I was furniture. I sat straight, squaring my shoulders in a new silk robe of emerald color, but she didn't notice the robe or my calmness. She was led by hunger and the habit of commanding. She walked up to the refrigerator, her hand, with chipped nail polish, reached for the handle. She had already taken a breath to start a tirade about what a bad hostess I was, how tired she was of carrying everything on her shoulders, and how empty our fridge was. "Open it," I said quietly. Quintessa didn't hear or didn't pay attention. She yanked the door toward herself with such force as if she wanted to rip it off. The door flew open, the light flared up, and Quintessa screamed. It wasn't a cry of pain. It was a yelp of pure animal terror and misunderstanding. She recoiled as if she saw the head of Medusa, the Gorgon inside. Before her, tightly packed from bottom to top, lay her inheritance. At eye level towered neat stacks of blue tin jars, black caviar, beluga, the most expensive, the rarest. There were many of them, dozens of jars shining under the electric light. Lower down on the shelf where cabbage usually rotted lay misted bottles of Dom Perignon labels with vintage years looked at her with silent reproach. Wheels of blue cheese wrapped in craft paper. Truffles looking like precious stones in special glass flasks. Bright pink sides of dragon fruit. Yellow mangoes. Purple mangosteen. A riot of colors this kitchen had never seen. On the door, instead of ketchup and mayonnaise, crowded boxes of Belgian chocolates and jars of foie gras. The fridge was bursting. It groaned with abundance. It was a feast during a plague. But the plague was the poverty I had banished. Quintessa stood with her hands pressed to her mouth. Her eyes were wide open, shock splashing in them. She shifted her gaze from the caviar to the champagne, from the champagne to the truffles. Her brain refused to process the information. A poor pensioner who was supposed to be boiling grits in water could not have the refrigerator of an Arab sheikh. "What?" she squeezed out. Her voice broke into a squeal. "What is this?" She reached out a trembling hand and touched a cold jar of caviar as if checking if it was real. The jar was real. Icy heavy. Quintessa turned to me. Her face went pale. The tan began to look like a dirty stain. "Mama, where from?" I slowly turned my head and looked at her. There was no fear in my eyes. No love, only calm. "I was hungry, Quintessa," I said simply. "And you took my card. I had to improvise." Quintessa snatched a jar of caviar from the shelf, gripping it as if it were a grenade. Metal clinked against her rings. "What does this mean?" she shrieked, poking the jar in my direction. "Where did you get the money for this? This is a fortune. Did you steal? Did you get a loan? Do you realize how much interest they'll charge?" She didn't wait for an answer. She darted around the kitchen. Her eyes darted feverishly. Suddenly, she froze, and her gaze darted to the hallway toward the living room. It finally started to dawn on her what she had missed in the first minutes, the emptiness. She threw the jar on the table. It rolled with a crash, nearly knocking over my cup, and dashed into the room. I heard her stomping, then the sound of drawers opening, then her scream full of panic. Where is the jewelry box, Mama? She ran back out, holding the empty velvet case for the spoons. It was open like the maw of a dead beast. The spoons, the silver. I was gasping for air. The ruby brooch, the clock. Mama, where is the clock? She looked around, seeing every missing thing now. Light spots on the wallpaper where paintings hung. The empty corner. Without the clock. The bare parquet without the rug. We've been robbed, she exhaled, and her face twisted in horror. Lord, while I was gone, you let someone in. You forgot to lock the door. God, what a nightmare. We have to call the police immediately. She grabbed her phone. Her fingers trembled, trying to unlock the screen. No police, Quintessa, I said. My voice sounded quiet, but in this hysteria, it was like an icy shower. I put the cup on the saucer. Clink. A sharp, short sound that put a period to her panic. What do you mean, no need? She stared at me like I was crazy. Don't you understand? They took everything. Everything valuable. It's worth millions. Nobody stole anything. I looked her right in the eye. My gaze was heavy, calm. I sold it. The phone fell from her hands and hit the floor with a thud. Sold it? She repeated in a whisper. The word was unfamiliar to her. Alien. To whom? Why? I told you. I was hungry. I stood up and walked to the table where the jar of caviar lay. I picked it up, feeling the pleasant coolness. You took my check, Quintessa. Left me an empty grits jar, and a person needs to eat, so I decided. I paused, enjoying the moment. I decided to have your brooch for breakfast, on toast with butter. It went down just wonderfully. And yesterday I drank grandfather's clock. Mahogany has an excellent aftertaste, it turns out. Especially if it's Chateau Margaux. It started to dawn on her. I saw the gears in her head grinding, connecting the facts. Empty walls, full fridge, my calm appearance. Her face began to change. Horror gave way to anger, and then the realization of a monstrous loss. She looked at the jar in my hand, not as food. She looked at it as liquid gold. As her apartment, car, comfortable life, which I had just turned into an appetizer. You, she hissed, stepping toward me. You ate my inheritance. You ate through the antiques. Are you out of your mind? That was my money, mine. I saved it. You saved it. I chuckled. You didn't even wipe the dust off it, Quintessa. You just waited for me to vacate the premises. You're crazy, she screamed. Senile old woman. How could you? It's a family heirloom. It's memory. Memory? I interrupted her. Memory of what? Of how we lived in poverty, sitting on chests of gold. No, daughter. They were just things, and they fulfilled their final purpose. They fed the mistress. Quintessa rushed to the refrigerator. She was shaking. I'll save at least something, she shouted, grabbing everything she could from the shelves. This can be returned. Sold back. I won't let you devour this. She grabbed 2 jars of caviar and a bottle of champagne, clutching them to her chest. Like rescued children. Give it back, she barked, seeing that I wasn't moving. It's mine. I'll take it back to the store. Do you have the receipt? I looked at her, at this grown woman acting like a greedy child. At her tan face distorted by greed. And nothing remained in me but disgust. I walked right up to her. She backed away, pressing her back against the open fridge door. Put it back, I said. No, she squealed. It's money. It's my money. Then I slapped my palm on the table. Bam. The sound was crisp, commanding. The cup jumped on the saucer. Put it back. My voice became still commanding. I had never spoken to her in such a tone even when she was little. That is my dinner, and you have no money. Remember, you spent it all on the beach. Quintessa froze. She had never seen me like this. She was used to Mama Mouse, Mama Shadow, and now before her stood the mistress. She tried to object, but the grip of her fingers loosened. You have no money, Quintessa, I repeated, enunciating every word. You came to an empty apartment to a mother who has no check. You wanted me to starve? Well, then now we'll starve together. Only I will be eating caviar, and you will watch because this is my food bought with my. Don't lie. Your own words don't lie. The only ones lying here are you. And you have been doing it for years. Malik got up from his chair. This is ridiculous, Mama. You're overreacting. You're attacking us over some private conversations. Everyone says things they don't mean when they're with friends. I watched him stand up. I didn't move. He didn't intimidate me. Sit down, Malik. I'm not finished. Something in my voice made him obey. He sat down. Tanisha had tears in her eyes. Fake tears. Tears of shame at being caught, not tears of true remorse. I knew the difference. I told them about Mother's Day. I told them exactly how I felt. I told them I confirmed with them the day before, that they said they would come, that I prepared everything, that I waited, that I cried all afternoon in that empty room while they were at a party, while they were having fun, while they didn't care about me at all. Tanisha sobbed. Mama, I'm so sorry. It was a mistake. We should have come. A mistake? I repeated. A mistake is forgetting to buy milk. A mistake is being late. What you did wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. You chose a party over your mother. You chose your friends over me. And then you had the nerve to come here that same night and ask me for money. Malik had his head down. He wouldn't look at me. He knew he had no defense. He knew everything I was saying was true. I told him that the night they arrived asking for 3,000, neighbor in her invariable floral housecoat, and looming behind her back was a Leicester Sterling. He had come to pick up the last box of books we had agreed upon this morning. Quintessa. Miss Theodosia blinked in surprise, looking at the disheveled daughter. What's all the screaming? I thought there was a fire. And this gentleman rang too. Miss Theodosia, you're a witness. Quintessa grabbed the neighbor by the arm and dragged her into the apartment. Mama has lost her mind. She sold everything. Everything clean out. Furniture, silver, paintings. She bought some food with that money and is sitting there eating. It's senile psychosis. I read about it. She doesn't know what she's doing. I need confirmation to in all the deals. You saw she was always strange. Quintessa dragged the neighbor into the kitchen where I sat at the table, spreading butter on crisp toast. I was calm. I was wearing the same elegant emerald robe, my hair neatly styled and light makeup on my face, which I hadn't done in 10 years. Miss Theodosia froze in the doorway. She expected to see a mad old woman in rags scattering money, but saw a woman who looked better than she had in the last 20 years. Yuli, the neighbor, asked cautiously. Quintessa says, "Are you sick?" "I am healthy, Theodosia." I smiled at her and gestured for her to enter. "Would you like tea?" "Earl Grey and a sandwich with caviar." "Real caviar?" Theodosia's eyes widened when she saw the table. "With caviar," she repeated, weakly. "She doesn't understand," Quintessa yelled, stomping her foot. "Don't you see? She blew a fortune on delicacies. This is a clear sign of dementia, loss of financial control." At that moment, Mr. Sterling entered the kitchen. He coughed delicately. "Pardon me, ladies." The door was open. Knew me. Perhaps he never bothered to know me. To him, I was always just Mama. The person who gives, the person who fixes problems, the person who is always there, never Vivian, never a person with feelings, with dreams, with dignity. I walked to the door. I opened it and waited there for them. "Go," I said. And this time my voice didn't tremble. This time I didn't feel guilt. This time I only felt peace. A strange peace. The peace of having told the truth. The peace of having defended myself. The peace of having chosen my dignity over their comfort. Tanisha walked past first, crying without looking at me. Malik followed her. He stopped at the door. "This isn't over, Mama. We'll talk when you've calmed down. There will be no more conversations." I told him, "This is final. Go." He left. I watched them walk toward the car. I saw them get in. I saw Malik slam his hand on the steering wheel in anger. I saw Tanisha wiping her tears. I saw the car start. I watched the taillights disappear down the street. And when they vanished completely, I closed the door. I stood there in the entryway alone in silence. I expected to feel something. Sadness, regret, fear. But I felt none of that. I only felt relief. A deep relief, like taking off a shoe that has been hurting you all day. Like letting go of a weight you have carried for so long that you forgot what it feels like to be without it. I went back to the dining room. I looked at the table, the dirty dishes, the scattered papers, the open envelopes, all the mess of the truth. I started clearing up. I didn't have the right. She did, cut in Mr. Sterling, taking the folder back from her. It is her property, and she disposed of it as she saw fit. Silence hung in the kitchen. Quintessa stood in the middle of the room, red, sweaty, humiliated. Everyone was looking at her, me with icy calm, Alistair with professional indifference, Theodosia judgingly chewing a sandwich. Quintessa realized she had lost the battle for the diagnosis. Calling doctors was pointless. The police even more so. Fine, she hissed, narrowing her eyes. Fine, you won this round. Mama ate everything. Good for you. But we still have to live. And when you run out of your delicacies, who will hand you a glass of water? Me. Don't count on it. I won't forgive you for this. I live here and I will turn your life into hell. You'll regret not dying of hunger. Turned to leave, to slam the door. She thought she had one last trump card left. Her presence, her youth, her ability to bully me in my own home. Stop, I said. I didn't raise my voice, but there was something in it that made her stop. I slowly pulled out the table drawer, the very one where I had moved the finds from her room. You are so worried about my future, Quintessa. About who will hand me a glass of water. About where I will live when I get really old. I took out the red brochure, Restful Meadow State Facility, and the draft of the power of attorney. Quintessa paused so abruptly it was as if all the blood had been drained from her. She recognized these papers. Where from? She whispered. I was looking for change, I said, standing up. Remember? You told me to look for loose change. I found this. I threw the brochure on the table. It slid across the smooth surface and stopped right in front of her. Smiling old people looked at her from cheap glossy paper. You plan to check me in there in a month, I said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. You wanted brownstone, take the money, and send me to die in a government ward smelling of bleach. Miss Theodosia gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. Mr. Sterling frowned, looking at Quintessa with open disgust. Mama, that's not what you think. Quintessa began to babble, retreating toward the door. It's just in case. It's a good sanatorium. Shut up, I interrupted her. I know what kind of place that is, and I know what a power of attorney is. I walked right up to her. You were so worried about housing for the elderly. I took the brochure and put it into her limp hand. Take it. Keep it for yourself. It will come in handy when you get old. What? She blinked uncomprehendingly. Because you won't live here anymore, I said quietly and firmly. Get out. You can't kick me out, she screeched, finding her voice. I'm registered here. This is my home. This is my apartment, I said. And I changed the locks this morning. Your keys don't work anymore. And your things? I nodded at the suitcase that still stood in the hallway. Your things are already packed. You didn't even unpack. I'll call the police. I'll sue. Sui. He shrugged. But while the court is dealing with it, you have nowhere to live. And if you try to break down the door, Mr. Sterling is a witness that you threaten me with physical harm, and Theodosia too. I looked at the neighbor. She nodded decisively, setting aside the unfinished sandwich. I'll confirm it, Yuli, and I'll tell the beat cop she wanted to dump you in the poorhouse. Quintessa looked at the three of us at the united wall against which her greed had smashed. She realized this was the end. She grabbed her suitcase. Damn you all, she shouted, breaking into a squeal. Choke on your caviar. I hope you die alone. She flew out of the apartment. The door slammed. Silence fell. Mr. Sterling coughed delicately. I should probably go, Mrs. Yulee. I will pick up the books tomorrow if you permit. Today it seems you need to rest. Thank you, Alistair. I nodded. Come tomorrow. When he left and Miss Theodosia, still gasping and lamenting, went to her place, finishing the sandwich on the go, I was left alone. I walked to the door and locked the deadbolt. Click, click. I leaned my forehead against the cool metal of the door. My heart beat steadily. My hands didn't tremble. I returned to the kitchen, picked up the jar of caviar Quintessa had tried to save. It was warm from her hands. I put it back in the fridge on the shelf next to the champagne. Cold is tastier, I said aloud. Ahead was the evening and a whole life, my life. 2 weeks passed, and the air in the apartment changed. It stopped being stale, infused with fear and the dust of the past. Now a draft walked here, light, fresh, smelling of autumn and change. I stepped out onto the balcony, pushing the door with my hip. In my hands was a tray with a steaming cup of coffee and a sandwich on. A crispy baguette with a thick layer of cream cheese and slices of red fish. On my shoulders lay a new wool shawl, soft terracotta color, warm as an embrace I had missed so much. I bought it with money from the sale of an old fur coat. The very Persian lamb, one I had saved for 20 years, and which turned out to be eaten by moths. Funny to think moths ate my coat, and I ate empty porridge to save the coat for the moths. The circle closed and I broke it. I sat in the wicker chair. Quintessa was gone. She disappeared from my life like a bad dream, leaving behind only silence. After that scene, she tried calling, threatened, cried, knocked on the door, but I told her through the closed door just one phrase. Tell you where, I replied. Or exactly when. And I'm not going for a little while. I'm leaving forever. Tanisha stood up. Mama, this is crazy. You can't just leave. What are people going to say? What are we going to say when they ask about you? There was her real concern. What are people going to say? They'll say whatever they want, I said. They can say I died. They can say I went crazy. They can say whatever makes them feel better. It's not my problem anymore. You two stop being my problem. She started crying. Real tears this time, or at least they seemed real, but they didn't move me anymore. I had cried. Enough for both of them. You can't do this to us, she said through sobs. We're your children. We need you. You don't need me, I replied. You need my money. You need the security of having an inheritance waiting for you. You need to be able to say you have a mother when it's convenient. But me, the person I am, you have never needed. She tried to hug me. I took a step back. No, Tanisha, not anymore. The fake hugs are over. The empty words are over. It's all over. I want you to leave. And when you close that door, understand that you are closing it forever. The next time you come here, if you come at all, this house won't be mine and I won't be here. She stood there looking at me as if she didn't recognize me. And she was right not to recognize me because I didn't recognize myself either. This new Vivian was someone I had never been before, someone who defended herself, someone who said no, someone who chose her own happiness over guilt. Tanisha walked toward the door. She stopped and turned around. If you change your mind, she said. If you decide to stay, if you decide to give us another chance, please call me. I'm not going to change my mind, I said. This is my final decision. Crumb. I took another bite. And this bite was the most delicious in my life. That is the story, my dear listeners. A story about how one day the cup of patience overflows and a person makes a choice in favor of themselves. What do you think? Did Yulee do the right thing? After all, essentially she deprived her daughter of an inheritance. In our society, it is accepted that parents must give everything to their children down to the last shirt. But where is the line when sacrifice turns into encouraging parasitism? Quintessa didn't just live off her mother. She planned to betray her in the cruelest way. Did she deserve such a lesson? Or was Yuli too cruel, kicking her own daughter out onto the street? I am very interested in your opinion. Do we often turn our own lives into a museum for someone else? Putting off joy for later, for a rainy day that might never come, or for a bright future for children who don't appreciate it? Write in the comments if you have had similar situations. Could you act as decisively as our heroine? If you liked this story, if it touched the strings of your soul, please like this video. It is very important to us. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new stories. We have many more stories in store about strong people in difficult fates. And of course, share this video with friends. Perhaps someone right now really needs to hear exactly these words. You owe nothing to anyone except yourself. Did you like the story, and which city are you listening from? Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.